friends, and welcome to August. I'm Danae, and we're going to do a little throwback on this podcast and the next one. I am going to use a podcast that my mom and I did a couple of years ago, and it was on another website that we work with. But there have been discussions I have seen from a couple of people who have talked about how hard it is to let go of things. And in fact, I put up a post on Instagram and asked, how hard is it for you to let go of a lot of things, of past hurts, of material possessions, of relationships that aren't healthy, of old beliefs. And that's why I'm going to bring these podcasts back to life, because this was an experience I went through and my mom went through on letting go of old beliefs. And in fact, it was more than just letting go mentally or emotionally. We actually left religion. And so the podcast that you'll hear, we were both very new to podcasting. We were nervous. We laughed a lot. We talk about some very basic things in part one that you're about to hear. But I think it's important to share part one before part two so you can get a feel for my mom and for the relationship that we have and kind of a little bit of our background. But part two will actually be our story of leaving religion from an Enneagram perspective. Why I reacted the way I did as a 7 and why she reacted the way she did as a 2. So bear with us on our nervousness, but I think it's important at this time in history because so many people are letting go and giving up old beliefs and old paradigms. Thanks for tuning in, and here we go. Before we dive into this, I want to introduce my guest who's in the studio with me today. Her name is Earlene Fowler. And I've been lucky enough to have known her all my life. And I mean all my life, literally, because she's my mom. Good morning, Mom.
Good morning, all. And thank you, Danae. That was really sweet. And no wonder I'm happy to be your mom.
I'm glad you're my mom. So let's talk about this thing that has a funny-sounding name, the Enneagram. Or Enneagram. I know a lot of people are very familiar with it, but many are probably not. And I know it has a funny sounding name. Mm-hmm. So it's actually spelled Enneagram, and it's pronounced Enneagram. Mm-hmm. And for those of you who have joined us and are listening in, there will be some links things we reference throughout the show. We'll talk about a test and a couple of books. So I'll have some links that you can check those out. But I'll also have a diagram of the Enneagram for you to look at in case you want to learn as we go. But the reason we're going to layer the Enneagram into this conversation is that as we've been talking about the spiral, we talk about how as a collective, we have our worldviews. We see the world through a traditional lens or a blue lens, as Doug refers to it, or a postmodern lens or green. But our own unique motivations and reactions will come into play, especially when we encounter change. And oftentimes we're shocked to discover that those that we assumed were on the same page as us actually may end up having the opposite reaction when we're going through that change.
Right. We even saw this play out in the last election.
Oh, boy.
Even among our family, our close kin.
Right.
We thought we were on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, when the talk started coming out and we saw the different reactions, different words, different meanings to each of our family, it was a shock.
It was a shock because we had our own unique perspectives, things that motivated us, fears that we were going through, and we were shocked to find out that we attached, I guess, to a different candidate, some to one, some to the other. And so when it all was said and done, and especially in the months following, when we were on Facebook, it's like, what happened?
Right.
I thought we were all in this together. And we were not. But this is why we're introducing the Enneagram, so that we can have open and empathic conversations through these changes.
Right.
We must learn to listen to each other through our unique perspectives. So in this podcast, actually, this is going to be part 1 and part 2. And in this one, we're going to focus more on the types, and our mom and I are going to go through our own individual types. And then in the second one, we'll talk about how we went through this. It was a difficult transformation,
to say the least,
where our church experience, or our leaving our church setting, was very different. And what happened for me and for her is, when we were going through this, the change of this environment, our church setting, our perspectives, even our beliefs, I came to realize that the best way for us to honor that community was to leave it. And I know that sounds confusing, but when I look back, and this has been many years, but when I look back and I think about the leadership of that community, it was their truth and what they understood at the moment. We were in direct conflict. And so for the community that they were leading, what was right for them was to not have our participation in that community with them. We were really, what we believed, or what we had come to see, had evolved from where we started. And the church that both of us grew up in was the only denomination we had ever been a part of. But my reaction to that situation was entirely different from my mom's.
That's right.
And so after years of studying the Enneagram, it began to make perfect sense to me.
Now,
it's right. And you'll see later. So again, part 2, we will actually talk about the leaving and the transition. But again, right now we're just going to kind of introduce types. So to begin with, just the word itself, the Enneagram, it sounds funky, and a lot of people are actually kind of intimidated by that word because it sounds new agey, or who knows what it is. Yeah, right. It's the literal translation is just a 9-sided drawing. So if you can look at the chart that we've enclosed or attached, you'll just see it's 9 sides. Ennea, from the Greek word for 9, and gramos, meaning something written or drawn. Simple as that.
Right. Sounds simple.
Well, yeah.
And the Enneagram it's a personality typing system, and consists of 9 different types. But for the record, no number is better or worse than the other. A 1 is not better than a 6 because it's number 1, and a 9 is not better than a 3 because it's a bigger number. Each number or type, it has its own unique strengths and weaknesses, and none is gender biased, thank goodness. And in fact, I like this simple, concise definition you can find on Wikipedia, and I'm going to read this because I am not reading my notes otherwise. Yeah, right.
We have a lot of notes. We're trying.
The Enneagram of personality, this is Wikipedia, or simply the Enneagram, is a description of the human psyche which is principally understood and taught as a typology of 9 interconnected personality types.
I love that definition.
Me too.
Right. But determining our personality type through the Enneagram, it doesn't put us in a box, but it actually helps us to see the box from which each individual experiences the world. So we talk about the spiral. Collectively, we see the world from a certain viewpoint, and individually, we each experience the world from a different point of view. But this is not a free pass. I know we've heard this before with certain people, I myself included, that we would say, like, oh, well, that's just how she is. Or, Oh, of course she reacts that way. You know, that's her type.
Yeah, we say, I know.
And we've either been doing that consciously or unconsciously for a long time, because you can see this in, if you're a parent and say you've got 2 kids and one comes down for breakfast just ready to take on the world, all smiles and turn on the radio and let's get the day started. And the other one comes down and it's like, don't look at me, don't talk to me until I put food in my belly. And you know that. The family dynamics knows, okay, don't mess with Randy before he's had his breakfast. And the girl, or me,
there you go.
My type is like, what's on the list for today? So the personality typing is nothing new.
But Mom, we see it in the same family, like your example. Same family, same parents, same surroundings, totally different personalities.
Right. It's like, how did this happen?
That's true. So back to Enneagram, maybe it would be helpful if maybe you just start off, Danae, by saying what it is not.
Okay. Well, what I'd say that it's not is it's not just another personality test that simply affirms what you knew about yourself already, or what
right.
or what you thought you knew.
But personality typing, it's not to say, this is not to say, in other words, that those other typology systems are faulty. In fact, over the years, I've discovered about myself, I'm a golden retriever.
Oh, I was an otter.
I'm a phlegmatic. I don't like the word. An ENFJ, whatever that is.
Whatever that means.
Although I'm not sure which Disney princess I am or which character from Game of Thrones.
Yeah. I know, because I took the online test, because thank you, Facebook. We've been bombarded with, take this test to determine things like, what's your word of the year? What country should you be living in? Or what color aura do you produce? But the point is, in all of these things, we truly do. We want to know who we are. And then we want to know, why do we think and act as we do? Especially, and you see this in relationships all the time. That's why they wrote a book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
Exactly.
We've been thinking about these things for years. Why do we think and act like we do?
Right. We want to know ourselves.
Right.
Like the TV shows, I love all those, like Who Do You Think You Are? Where the host helps trace the guest family tree. And for me, I can just feel the genuine emotion when you see those people discover the stories of their ancestors.
Right.
Family members that have been dead for hundreds of years, and yet our connection to our story is so strong.
Oh, my goodness. I even gave Doug an ancestry DNA test as a birthday present this year. I think a lot of people ordered it because we're still we're waiting on the results of it, because we just want to know, where do we come from? But I hope it doesn't come back that he and I aren't cousins.
Well, it's all of us have the desire to know ourselves, and it's in our DNA. But beyond DNA or genealogy is our desire to know why we think like we do. Why do we react as we do? What drives our fears and joys and our relationships? And as we've said over and over, if what we're studying, whether it's the intricate details of the biblical narrative or spiral dynamics or technology or just whatever, if it doesn't matter in my relationships, then it doesn't really matter. Right. In fact, I think the scripture states it perfectly for us, or for me anyway. It says, if I have all knowledge but have not love, I'm but a sounding gong, just noise.
Absolutely, that's right. And I want to just say this clearly. I'm not here to teach the Enneagram, because I'm still very much a student. But Mom, since you and I, we've talked about this for years now, I just thought it would be helpful to share our stories from our similar but unique perspectives.
Right.
So much like spiral dynamics is a tool that we discover and better understand our macro or our worldview, the Enneagram is a tool that gives us a micro view to help us understand our individual, unique psychological motivations. And there are certain basic motivations that just drive all of us. And when we can identify these motivations, we can not only understand why we do what we do, but we also have a reason to offer grace to those who think differently from us.
That is so true. And when I understand that others may have a different core motivation than I, or that they see the world through a different lens and might really struggle with something that I could do in my sleep, it's so much easier to offer them grace and room to grow if I know where they're coming from.
Oh, my goodness.
We don't need the Enneagram to begin this practice, but it sure seems to help.
I know. I sure wish I'd known this a long time ago. We'll talk about that again later. Yeah. But so let's talk about our personal numbers, what our Enneagram number or type. Some people don't like to use the word number, and they prefer what's your type, but you'll probably hear me refer to a number because I like my number. But one of the types on the Enneagram is the 7. And that's my type. We're called the enthusiasts.
That's it.
And part of that definition or description is that we have hundreds of ideas going on in our head all at once. And I know when I was going off to college, this is way before I knew anything about the Enneagram, but I told this to a lady who was actually teaching an Enneagram course. I told her this example, and she said, that is the most perfect description I've ever heard. But so here I was going to college, and my mom says, well, I hope they offer a major in potpourri because you just want to learn something about everything.
Exactly. That is the spot-on description of you, Danae. But how did you really come to know that you were a 7 type on the Enneagram?
Well, about 9 years ago, I was introduced to it, and just a friend of mine had a book, and she was reading it, and she said, oh, you might find this interesting. Mm. And she said, my husband is a 7. I was like, well, what's a 7? So I began reading the book, and I was like, oh, well, that sounds an awful lot like me. So she said, well, there's a test you can take online, and it was in the book, and actually we'll provide a link to that. So, of course, I went on, and immediately I took that test, and about the test, there's a short test, and then there's a long test. I think the first one's like 44 questions, and it just kind of gives you an idea if you might be that. And I think the other test is like 164 questions. But anyway, and all that, I need to also say that taking an online test is really just a starting point. This is a lifetime study, or many years study to truly understand why you think you are. Because, again, a test is just a starting place, unless you're a 7, and then it's pretty clear from the beginning, or it was to me. So like any good 7, I just skimmed right past the less than favorable aspects and was like, woohoo, I won the Enneagram lottery. Who wouldn't want to be a 7? We're the fun number. And that's a word you hear a lot with 7s. Oh, they're fun. That's right. They're the life of the party. But almost 9 years later, I've learned that my response to my discovery was exactly what an unhealthy 7 would say. I would skim right past the bad parts. So while I love the aspects of my personality type, it's been hard to face the less than pleasurable characteristics. But then that's what the Enneagram is all about.
Right.
So what's it like to be a 7, you ask? I'm going to borrow, if anybody remembers, of course you do, Jeff Foxworthy, when he used to say you might be a redneck if. I'm just going to give you a couple funny or maybe dead-on examples of you might be a 7 if.
Oh, great.
Okay. So, number 1, you might be a 7 if you have more, quote, great ideas than you could ever accomplish in a lifetime.
Right.
You might be a 7 if you've been called the eternal optimist and the queen of denial in the same sentence. And you might be a 7 if you are amazing at starting projects. not so great on the follow through.
Yep.
We are great at starting projects, but we need people who compliment us and say, let's take that idea and move it to completion. But where's the fun in that? And sevens suffer from what some people call FOMO, fear of missing out.
That's you.
That's me. So like if somebody or 3 different people invite you to a birthday party and they're all on the same day, you're going to figure out a way to go to all 3 because you can't even imagine missing out on any of them.
You've done that.
I have. But then there's the other side of this positive outlook. And so like we were in a women's class. It was a Bible study one time, and we were it was a small group. There's probably like 20 women in there. And one of the women was just opening her heart and being vulnerable and said, well, I just want to share that I suffer from depression. And I actually looked at her and said, well, just tell yourself you're happy.
Oh, no.
And you'll get over it. Yeah. At the ripe old age of 26, that was my wisdom, that if you just thought positive, everything would be okay. But, right?
Sevens, yeah.
You've dealt with this a lot. So we would prefer just to get on with things, not look back and stew over our failures or disappointments. And another personal example is I was in the middle of a pretty heated argument with a very good friend, and I said, we're going to get over this in a few days, so why don't we just cut to the chase and be happy now?
Wish we could all do that.
And not deal with the issue.
Yeah.
So, in a nutshell, sevens are attracted to and we value joy, variety, and excitement. We want to be the happy people. We want to make the world a more delightful place to live in. Sevens want to taste and experience all the possibilities life has to offer. And having fun and being positive is what life is all about.
And you pass it on to others, too.
Oh.
We feel your joy.
Oh, well, thank you. But sometimes we can fire hose you with our joy and leave you feeling truly run over, not validated, because I didn't know where you were coming from. And that's the point of this. Yeah. Sevens avoid experiencing or expressing any pain or suffering when we're in our unhealthy state.
Right.
And so, yes, the goal is to move on into an observation of this and not suppress what we call our shadow side. And if something stops being fun, or even a friend stops being fun, this is terrible, but we easily can just drop it and move on to a more novel adventure. We get nervous when we only have one thing to attend or only one option. And oh my goodness, Mom.
Life cannot be boring for a 7.
No, but yes, let's do this one. Let's go to this restaurant. Let's go to all of them. And this is funny because Doug, I said, oh, let's try a new restaurant. He goes, why? We know we like this one. Exactly. We've had perfect experiences every time. And I'm like, yeah, but there's a new one.
It's not different.
Right. So whether it's being lightheaded or lighthearted, that kind of describes a 7. We tend to avoid getting too heavy or serious, and we can have difficulty acknowledging the pain that others experience. That was the revelation to me. I have not been able to feel your pain because I'm just covering up my own. Mm-hmm. So you see that even being the enthusiast or overly optimistic 24/7 leaves little time and room for introspection. Mm-hmm. So for me, using the Enneagram as a tool of empathy means I learn to lean into those parts of myself that I find difficult to deal with, to truly try to know myself so I can open my heart to what someone else is feeling, to know them.
Right.
And this has been such an eye-opening journey for me because my default setting is not empathy. And you'll hear from my mom, it is more hers. Mine is more avoidance. So when I hear the words of Jesus, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, I truly believe that this is a call to know all aspects of ourselves so that we can know and show empathy to each other. Again, I can't feel your pain if I never acknowledge my own.
That is true.
So, Mom, phew, that was exhausting.
But it was fun.
Of course it was. And we're just getting started. I could tell you so many fun things. But let's talk about your number. What is your Enneagram number?
Well, I felt like you did, Danae, when I took the test. I discovered I'm a type 2 on the Enneagram because when I read the initial descriptors, the 2 sounded to me like the darlings of the Enneagram.
Of course.
Type 2s are known as the helper or the giver and are described as empathetic, sincere, and warm-hearted, and friendly and generous
that
and self-sacrificing and well-meaning and driven to be close to others. Oh, yeah. 2s feel things deeply and have a seemingly, I really have this uncanny ability to feel or to intuit and take on others' feelings. Well, to me, that sounded like,
yeah,
wow.
Sounds good.
Eagle Scout, Mother Teresa, John Boy Walton, all rolled into one. Yeah.
That's you. That is you.
Definitely. I wanted to be a 2. But in my head, that's when I could hear Paul Harvey's voice saying, and now for the rest of the story. Oh,
I love Paul Harvey.
Oh, yeah. So me and 2s at our best. 2s are unselfish and altruistic and have unconditional love for others. But people of this personality type essentially feel that they are worthy insofar as they are helpful to others. That's a drive. Love is their highest ideal. Helping others make 2s feel good about themselves. But being needed makes them feel important or selfless. Makes 2s, if we're needed, we feel virtuous. Good night. We're jumping there to help. And at the worst, there is a good side and bad side, Paul Harvey reminds us. And at the worst case, we are resentful martyrs. Ooh, that's hard to hear. But there's help for 2s and for every type. The Enneagram Institute has some great material, and it helps us to see that 2's inner development may be limited by our shadow side, which you referred to. And that shadow side for a 2 is pride, self-deception. It's the tendency to become over-involved in the lives of others, the tendency to manipulate others by being flattering or sentimental or people-pleasing. And that's in order to get our own emotional needs met. We think we need to be needed.
Right.
If you haven't read Ian Cron's book, and The Road Back to You, it is great. I surely recommend it. Of course, it struck a note for me because I love how he explains 2s. 2s are the first responder in a crisis and the last to leave a dinner party if there are still dishes to wash.
That is why you're always invited to the party.
Hello, 2s. But he brings us back to the ground, too, by revealing that all of the numbers on the Enneagram, 2s are the most sensitive to criticism. He writes for me and for all of us 2s. Pride is the deadly sin of the 2. Now, that sounds nonsensical, but it shows itself in so many ways that we focus our attention and energy on meeting the needs of others while giving the impression that we have no needs of our own. What lies beneath that pride, he asked. Ouch. So, for instance, there's a type on the Enneagram who, if they're the host of that dinner party that, you talked about a while ago, they just might not appreciate my harem-scarum system of loading their dishwasher by not placing all the forks, all the knives, all the spoon in their separate slots.
In order.
Right. Or not putting the dinner plates on one side and the salad plates on the other.
Right.
You know that.
I know that type.
What are they going to do? Rearrange it.
Yes.
So, But I like helping people, and I like learning about myself. So I'm glad I'm a 2, since 2s and 3s and 4s on the types are feeling or heart triad. And I like that I can intuit others' feelings and can respond to them with empathy. And I like helping people.
And you're very good at it.
Thank you, darling. But 2s have to learn to use discretion, when to jump in the water and to save someone. If I see somebody flailing around in the deep end of the pool, it doesn't mean that I need to jump in and drag them out. They may simply be doing their best butterfly stroke in a race for the title.
Right. Okay, so these are the very basic descriptions. This, like I've said, please, if you're interested, get a book or go online and read all that you can, because it's just, you will learn so much about your own type, but when you learn about others, that's where I think the power comes in. So now we might ask, so what? Okay, now we know our type, so what?
Good question. It reminds me, when I was about 20, I remember this so clearly, thinking to myself, well, now that we're under the law of Christ, since the law of Moses just got out of hand, nobody but Jesus could keep it anyway.
So much for the commandments.
Right. But if only God had just made a list of new laws, I figured I could know just what to do.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, how'd that work out for you, Earlene? When the Israelites, the ones I ridicule for remaining so immature and ignorant, despite having all the rules written down that any fool could see, but I matured a little bit, I hope. I figured out that just like those Israelites could never keep all those laws, neither could I keep all the rules. And then I just kept hearing Jesus' words repeated through the writers of the New Testament. And he says, you're my friend if you do what I command. My command is this: love each other. In fact, they all quote him saying, love your neighbor as yourself. So,
That's pretty easy. That sounds easy.
Right.
Just love, right?
Right. But the quandary just kept growing and growing as I kept learning how to love. I find that actions and motives and words that I thought were loving were, in fact, sometimes actually harmful or hateful.
Oh, that sounds like when this past year, I decided to throw my own birthday party because as a 7, I wanted to have everything fun lined out and I love to play games. So I invited this group of people and I said, let's play this game. And I don't know if you've seen it. If you've watched Ellen, you've seen it. It's one where you put that mouth guard in and then they give you a phrase you have to say and you've got this big thing in your mouth and it's hilarious. Well, to me it was hilarious and fun. And so in this group I said, okay, we're all going to play this game because this is going to be so much fun. And guess what? There were people that were
faces.
Like, oh, absolutely not. It just scared the fire out of them to think, and I'm not sure what was going through their mind.
Shocked, scared to death.
Yes,
Run.
I'll look stupid or no. But what I thought, just assumed, would be fun for everyone. See, I need to look
That's
through
right.
in love and see what is the best for the collective.
That's right. So, see, when we see love as the purpose in our lives, we also got to feel that doing love right is not my motive, but my adventure. I guess it's not a responsibility, but it's an ongoing discovery that Spirit keeps unfolding before us. And one of the ways I'm discovering how to love, is through the Enneagram.
I know our friend Patty, about 10 years ago, we sat in a circle talking about our transitions. We were all going through this, what's going on, what's next, as we were having the changes of community, leaving church or whatever. And Patty said, I just think this thing we talk about, this love thing, is so much bigger than any of us know. And so I think we're getting to the good part. It's the so what of it all. And so as we wrap up this first session, before we get into our personal stories, Mom, I I want to just say to you, thank you for letting me soak up your wisdom and letting me see by your example that learning is a lifetime journey.
Oh, yeah.
You're still asking and seeking. And to me, that's so liberating. And in true 7 fashion, I'm having a lot of fun with you on this ride.
And Danae, is, you said, knowing your type does not put you in a box, but when you read the descriptors of the 9 different types, you'll discover that you have some of the traits of each of those. But there's only one that clearly describes the true motivators for each individual. There are healthy, average, and unhealthy divisions of each, as well as other guidelines that help us identify and know our true selves. And for instance, just because Danae is a 7, she couldn't have been a better helper to me. I needed help too in preparing for this podcast. And she does that any other time as well.
Well, let me just say, again, yes, when I said, Mom, let's do a podcast on this, because we've been studying the Enneagram together for years. And I thought, we'll just get on and pull up our microphones and have a conversation. This is going to be so much fun. And she was like, do we have an outline? Do we have a theme? Where are we going? What are the numbers? What are the bullet points? And I was like, well, Mom, we've been talking about it for years. And we truly have struggled through this together. But she's helped me, and I've helped her.
That's right. Although I'm a 2. I couldn't be having more fun with this adventure with you.
Thank you. And for those of you who are listening, we thank you. This podcasting venture is new for she and I together, and it's been a little scary. But I hope you'll come back next week to hear our personal story of leaving a tradition that had been our identity, or what we thought was our identity. But leaving didn't mean abandoning the beautiful parts of our history. We'll talk about transcend and include. Thank you for listening to part 1. And I hope if you are in the middle of going through a deconstruction of your faith, if you're in a major transition and there's a little tension, maybe in the family or with friends, I want you to know you're not alone. There are so many people going through this right now. But why I wanted to bring this podcast back again is because when we understand that a lot of us go through this quickly and a lot of us go through it very slowly and painfully, but that we have our own unique ways of seeing and processing these thoughts, that maybe we can have empathy for ourselves, for family or friends, or anybody who's breaking out of old or past beliefs, maybe even leaving religion and wondering, where do we go from now? I hope you'll listen next week as we tell you exactly how we each processed this and went through this, because it was very different. But in the meantime, as we are all on this Enneagram and growth path together, I hope you truly get to understand the joy of who you are by loving your own number. Talk to you next week.